Hello and welcome to Talkin' Jets reality check time. I am Matt O'Leary alongside my good buddy Jets Chaos, Jeremy. How are you?
Doing well. We are that much closer to the season. Just got to watch some backup players fight for some spots on Saturday, and then the countdown begins to the season. And I cannot be more excited than I am right now.
I am amped up. I am ready for this season to come here. Clearly, whichever pixels Jeremy, I think is excited as well for this season to get started underway here. Just teasing as always. Let's get into our topic of the day with resting starters. That has been a big time debate over the internet and over the last couple of weeks, whether or not the Jets should play or rest their starters in the preseason. And we got confirmation today. Robert Saleh came out and said that the starters will not play in this preseason game. So how does that, excuse me, how does that have you feeling so far, Jeremy?
Well, as somebody who would who's going to be watching that game to see them play, I understand it. And I know there are people who are against it that are saying, oh, you have to give them. I honestly think the joint practice, which we'll talk about, I think is just as valuable as the game itself. And if you watch Ryan, on Jets Talk 24/7, he put out every play and you can see it. Those guys are playing super hard. There's a lot of pride on the line. It looked fast to me. It looked intense to me. Somebody came out of camp and said, I think it was Solomon Thomas, that it was the hardest camp he's ever had as far as the amount of reps and the amount of work. I just don't think it matters that much 2 weeks before a real season game that our starters play a drive or two. Selfishly, I would love to see it because I can't get enough of it. I can't wait to see this starting team play, but I just don't think that that's what's going to determine our success this season and be enough for people to be upset about one way or another.
Yeah, I'm very which is probably not good for a podcaster or YouTube host. I feel very down the middle on this. Like I could kind of see if the Jets decided that they did want to play their starters, why trying to get them some reps together in a game situation before the start of the season. But on the other hand, like wanting to rest them and using the opportunity in joint practices to get your looks and get your reps in. Like we saw the quote earlier in the week with Robert Saleh, or Aaron Rodgers told Robert Saleh rather that they were or vice versa, whatever, 300 more snaps of practice at this point than they were a year ago in camp. So they are getting extended reps in the preseason or in training camp rather. And the Jets don't think they need to play their guys in the preseason. And you know what, for Rodgers, at least I'm going to let him make that call. I think you kind of default to the future Hall of Fame quarterback, what he wants to do to get himself ready, and you kind of go by that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a veteran. He knows what he needs. He has a feel for the game. He's done it for as many years as he had. And I cannot say enough about how good he looked yesterday against the Giants. It was absolutely mind-boggling. I don't think I've ever seen a Jets quarterback get rid of the ball so quickly, play after play. It was actually astonishing. I was just sitting there just blown away by how fast he gets rid of that football and how accurate it is. I don't know how he sees the field and processes that quickly, but I guess that's what it takes to be a Hall of Fame player, to be just amazing.
Yeah, the throw that he made deep down the sideline to Garrett Wilson was really, really impressive. He had a clean pocket, but he kind of threw it off his back foot and just put it in an absolutely perfect place. Poor Nick McLeod, who was getting worked by Garrett Wilson time and time again. And Aaron Rodgers kind of just having his way a little bit with the Giants defense yesterday. You're right. At the same time, like it's only, if they were to play, it's probably 2 drives. So how many plays is that? Best case scenario, maybe like 15 snaps on offense. I don't know if it's going to make a huge difference one way or the other. And then you obviously get into the inherent injury risk. And we know all too well injuries and the Jets over the last couple of years.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of people say you can't. I understand the expression you can't play scared, but you also can't play stupid. And you got to know and understand this organization and look at our history and look at things that have happened and understand that it's not scared, it's smart to protect your players and to go into a season healthy. I mean, if any group of fans or any fan base deserves to have their roster stay healthy, I think it's this fan base. I think we've endured so many awful injuries and so many, obstacles to finally reach our potential that it's very hard for me to argue against caution because I've been burned way too many times. I mean, they had this big discussion with Zach Wilson. I know, different situation, but when they thought he could be our quarterback, and then he did that little fake move or whatever, and then missed the start of that season when Joe Flacco had to start against the Ravens. So there's your example of things can go wrong in the preseason when you start your starters.
Yeah, we've seen it all too well on this one. Our guy Peter from up in the beautiful Hudson Valley, he's hanging out with us. He says, "I'm old-fashioned, but it was a time. Yeah, I'm old-fashioned, but it was a time before joint practices. Since the Jets pretty much dominated yesterday, then I withdrew my previous stance on seeing starters play a drive or two." So, did that have any impact on you? Like yesterday's performance, did that skew your view one way or the other? Like, were you leaning more towards them playing, or yesterday didn't really have an impact on what you thought was the right play here?
It had a little impact. After Monday's practice, which was the worst of the entire camp for the offense, if we would have come out flat against the Giants defense and been out of sync, out of sorts, there might have been a little bit of part of me that thought, you know what, we need to end on a high note. And, we need to come out there Saturday and maybe have a couple of drives and try to establish some sync and, togetherness. But so I would say overall, not a huge impact, but it does make me feel more comfortable about the starters not playing as far as the success that we had yesterday.
Yeah, and they were successful. They remained pretty healthy as well, which is a really good sign. You're rooting for health for all these guys and getting through camp healthy. And Michael Carter a little bit banged up. Gibson missed a week or two, and Michael Carter and Olu, but nothing where like last year. Unfortunately, you lost Chuck Clark, who was going to be a starter before the year even really truly got underway in OTAs. He didn't have that this year. So knock on wood, obviously that's a positive going into this final game. I guess, what do you think changed it? I guess would be my question. Because last year in this game, they did play their starters for a couple series. So what changed from last year to this year, especially when you consider they went through that game and didn't have any health concerns a year ago?
Well, we didn't have an offensive line play together, a first-string offensive line play together last camp. If you remember, the two of the starters were hurt until the very end. So there was a lot of juggling around, mixing around, and very little consistency there. So that would have been an argument of why they wanted to come out. I think there was also a lot of people who wanted to see Aaron Rodgers and maybe a little bit of wanting to please the fans even. But I just think that this is a very different team than last year. I think we're coming in with a completely different offensive line. I think that room has been dramatically changed. And the fact that they've been together all camp and they're veterans and they've been looking great and looking solid, I think changes, I think that's the really big turnaround or change from last year. And I think just the fact that everybody's been looking better, even Lazard, he still has his case of the drops, but overall he's looked a lot better and been a lot more impactful in practice. And then obviously Garrett Wilson has been tearing it up. And it just doesn't seem like there's a concern right now. This offense feels ready to go.
It does feel ready to go, and that's exciting and a rare and welcome change for the Jets. We've watched a lot of horrible offenses over a time. We watched a lot of bad quarterback play last year in particular. I mean, you got 4 snaps of Aaron Rodgers, and then we had to watch Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and Tim Boyle the rest of the way. It's not fair or not right. But First State Jets brings up a good point that I wanted to get to here in the chat. Thank you for hanging out with us. We got a little over 50 people hanging. Leave a like if you're liking what you got so far. Aaron wanted to, if I remember, he made a big deal about visualizing playing in the stadium in green and white for the first time. So he got his reps. He got the pushed by Jihad Ward, and then he threw the touchdown pass and said, "Don't poke the bear." And that was it. We got that little preseason action. If I'll put it to you this way, if we have to forego any Aaron Rodgers in the preseason, hopefully this means that he's going to play more than 4 plays in the regular season. Because I remember a year ago, I was a lot more concerned. I was going, I don't want to see the starters. I don't want to risk injury. And then they played. Rodgers looked good and he stayed healthy. And then I was like, okay, sigh of relief. Little did we know what would happen in week 1, but maybe there's a sign of like, hey, they're just going to be healthy this year.
They're unexplainable, knock on wood. There is, I don't know, this feeling. I don't know if everybody feels it. I feel a little bit more of a positive energy.
Yeah.
There's just something that feels different about this camp, this year, this season. It started when the offseason started, and they just quickly revamped that offensive line, and you just started to feel this momentum. Like, wow, this could be really special. And then Aaron coming into camp, OTAs, and then coming into camp completely looking healthy and fine and looking like Aaron Rodgers. And Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. It's just the way things have looked. It's just been day after day, like stacking days of feeling good. And suddenly it feels like just like the tide has turned and that this is really going to be our opportunity. This year is going to be our opportunity. There's going to be some injuries. There's no question about that.
Sure.
Every team has some injuries. But maybe finally this is our year to avoid the disastrous ones.
Sign me up. Dano is hanging with us. What's up, Dano? Question: what, if anything, are the facts that you guys have heard about Dallas being interested in 𝐒𝐮? Is the buzz 𝐒𝐮 specific or just running back specific? So Dano was mentioning it on the Jets roundtable today. I was on with Richie at 1:00. And he was saying that Cowboys fans were in his mentions wanting a running back, and he thought maybe involving 𝐒𝐮 𝐂, but I think that's more like fan orientated. Like the Cowboys see what their running back room looks like, and they're just going, okay, well, the Jets probably aren't carrying 4 backs, so whoever they cut is maybe a target here. But like, I don't think that means, oh, because the Cowboys are interested, like now you can flip them for a draft pick kind of a thing. Do you feel differently?
It would be very hard to imagine that happening before, the cuts, the final cuts, because there'll be a lot of running backs like 𝐒𝐮 either cut or, put on the practice squad, which is the same thing because you have the time to sign them or even poach them from the practice squad. It just doesn't make sense why they would give any kind of draft capital or do anything like that until the roster cuts are in. And 𝐒𝐮 just hasn't done enough to, I don't think, that would excite a team to think we have to secure him now. I think he's one of a handful of potential players that can bring value to a team that might be available, specifically at the running back position. I think it's a really easy position to bring in a guy of 𝐒𝐮's caliber, at the last second. It's just that's the way it is with running backs today right now. I like 𝐒𝐮 a lot, and I think he's super young, and there's potential there, and I think he could be a good back. But I think that you can make that argument for a bunch of guys that have been drafted in the last 2 years that, are young and haven't fully developed yet.
Nose Kills, first super chat of the day. Thank you so much, Nose Kills. Allen trucking Belton made me think of bugs and windshields for some reason. What did you see the clip yesterday of Braelon Allen running over some poor Giants linebacker?
He is an absolute beast. You know, we loved this kid going into the draft. The weeks before the draft, he became one of the hottest names in the Jets fan base, I think, coming to the draft. I think in our mock drafts, people were picking him, and we were all watching his highlights from Wisconsin. And the thing that surprises me about him is I knew he was a big back. I didn't know he was a giant back. And even seeing him standing on the sideline, he looks like a beast. And when you take that size and that power and that strength, and then you look at what I was impressed with him is just the skill, the explosiveness, his ability to just go from 0 to 60. I'm super excited about this running back. I think he's more than just an RB2. I think this is a guy that is going to be special when he's in the game and do some great things for us.
Want to get to another comment in here on Braelon Allen, but first got to toss this one up from Martin, who says, Matt, you really do a great job breaking down the Jets. Thank you, Martin. And that guy Jeremy's okay too, I guess.
Not like you.
Just giving you a hard time there. I wanted to get to on Braelon Allen. This is what I wanted to get to. Sorry, sidetracked. What surprised me the most about Braelon Allen, you pointed out just the sheer size of him on the sideline he's intimidating. You send him off the bus first when you're in high school. You send him off first to lead the pack. But what I was going to say is I was not expecting him to have as good of hands as what he showed so far in training camp. And the reason behind that, we just never really saw that at Wisconsin. So it wasn't like, oh, this guy had a ton of opportunity at Wisconsin and was proven that he couldn't catch. They just never really utilized him in that role. So my assumption of him coming into camp was, all right, that's just not really a strong suit of his game. Don't really expect a whole lot there. And I think he's been fine, even better than fine. He's been good at times catching the ball out of the backfield.
Yeah, I think one of the things I tweeted about before that I'm so excited about this room is from Hall to Allen to Davis. We have three backs who are full, complete running backs. All three, aside from being, having a little bit different running skills. Obviously, Breece Hall right now is a little bit different than Davis, but what they all have in common is, aside from their running ability, obviously they can go out for a pass, they can run routes, they can be receiving running backs. And then thirdly, they're all really good blocking in pass protection. So they're all complete backs, which I think is really important because you're not making a compromise or a sacrifice no matter which three is out there. You're not telling the other team what you're going to be doing, because when you have a running back who can't pass protect, it's a big tell when you bring him into the game to the other team, in most situations. And if you're trying to trick them and then end up passing with a running back who can't pass protect, now you're putting your quarterback at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big difference. It's going to be a big difference there from that. On Braelon Allen, while we're on the topic, do you think he plays much in this preseason game? Because I don't know about you, and obviously I just asked you, so please tell me in a second here. But what I was going to say is I feel like this is going to be like, remember the preseason games of old when they would play four, and that fourth preseason game against the Eagles every year was when absolutely nobody played, and it was essentially the guys who were going to get cut 5 minutes after the game. They all suited up because I don't really think we see Braelon Allen. We have a question on Olu that we'll get to in a second. I don't really know how much we're going to see of him, if any. I'm kind of just curious your thoughts on one, I guess, Braelon Allen, if we see a lot of him, and who else might rest in this game.
Yeah, I don't know. You might see one or two drives of him, but technically Braelon Allen is a starter. RB2 is a starter in this league, in the sense that they might not be there the opening play. They might not be RB1, but they're starters in the sense that they're going to be contributors game one. They're going to be contributors throughout the season. They're going to play. They're going to be out there. So those might be guys you might consider resting. I wouldn't be shocked, though, if he did a drive or two, just because, again, rookie, more reps, the better, more experience, the better under the lights, in a stadium with a lot of fans there. Maybe we see more of Davis. But I think by maybe by the second quarter, even certainly the second half, it's going to be a bunch of, it's going to be, the roster of the guys, maybe some that have that outside shot in every room to steal that last spot. Like on the defensive line, you'll still have McKinley and McGregor out there. Watts, obviously they'll all play, fighting for that final spot. Brownlee, like in the running back, in the wide receiver room, you'll have guys like that playing. But other than that, it's going to be like the names we never even heard of, right? It's going to be all the undrafted free agents, all the walk-ons, most of which will end up working, we call the future Home Depot workers, or guys who are fighting for a spot on the practice squad. And that's just the reality of what it's probably going to be the game, guaranteed, at least for the second half, no question.
I'm thinking a lot of 𝐒𝐭𝐲𝐦 𝐂 and Deion Jackson carries in the second half of this one. And, Isaiah Winstead and Lance McCutcheon catches, and maybe Lincoln Sefcik. What'd you say?
A lot of 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬.
Oh, yeah. He's been awful, by the way. I hate to say it, but he's looked horrible in training camp in the preseason.
Yeah, he's just kind of like this uncontrollable. Yeah, he's a stud athlete. He's strong. He's big. He's fast. But he's just not a football player. He's an athlete, but he's not a football player. And
Car says this game is huge for UFL scouts. You're probably not wrong. That sounds really harsh. These guys are great athletes, great football players, but unfortunately you only can keep 53 of them. And the competition is so high that, it's the unfortunate truth. A lot of these guys probably aren't going to make rosters. They might end up on the practice squad. It's tough. Is there anyone in particular for this game, now that we know that they are resting starters? Like, are there anyone who's like fringe fighting for a roster spot that you want to see something out of, or that you need to see?
Well, I'm hoping, we all have our favorites. So we have people we like because we followed them in college and we liked them early. I'm shocked that he was playing center, but because he was a left guard in college. But I really like the undrafted free agent Brady Latham. I know realistically he's a long shot to make the roster, especially because I think on the inside of the offensive line, if anything, we're going to probably pick somebody up and add somebody. But I would love to see him make the practice squad. So I think we all have our guys that we'd like to at least see make the practice squad, stash away, and hope maybe it'll develop. But that's kind of like, if McGregor and McKinley both can't make the squad, hopefully the other one is on the practice squad. I don't know if they'll last there because defensive line, there's such a big need around the league, and those guys do seem talented. But that guy Watts, you might see on the practice squad.
Yeah.
So I think it's just about picking your favorites, and will they make the practice squad or not? Will they get poached?
Yeah, like guys like Takk McKinley, I think, have played so well in training camp in the preseason. I feel like he feels about as close to a lock as you could get for someone who was signed to compete for a spot. I think he's done more than enough. I really like Leonard Taylor a lot. I would like to see him make the roster, but he kind of feels like someone who might end up being on the practice squad, or honestly, someone who gets claimed. If they try to put him on the practice squad, I could totally see a team, even like the Giants, who you just saw in practice, they could use some help on the interior of their defensive line. But Watts is a great call out for someone who I think is a practice squad guy. I see a comment on Mr. Irrelevant. Hope he makes the roster. Jalen 𝐂 we'll probably see a lot of him. I don't know if he makes it. It's going to be really hard next week to get this thing down to 53. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. It's going to be stressful in that room. We know that the Jets organization, some teams don't as much, than others. You know, teams are different, but we really value special teams very highly. We've seen players take roster spots that they never could have claimed just based on position play, but their special teams play. So that's a giant wild card that we have to like always consider and remember, is that there are guys that make the team based on special teams, and the Jets value that really highly.
They absolutely do. There's a lot of guys like Codrington, who's been really good on the returns, man. Does he make the team because of the returns? And if you do that, well, then you probably have to carry 7 corners. And where are you cutting from in other spots?
Yeah, I think that the hope that he has with those great returns is the spot that 𝐒𝐿 was fighting for, right? 𝐒𝐿, I don't think anybody knows the real reason, suddenly left camp, and even though he was looking really good. And I think to anybody who was sore about that or upset about that, thinking, oh man, I really thought he'd be this great return guy. I think we were given a gift, and I think we all saw it last week during the game. We have somebody, we might have something very special as far as the returner is concerned. I also thought Davis looked good returning punts. So that'll be interesting to see. You're right. It's difficult. It's difficult because to keep a guy like that for those returns, who has to go? Somebody has to be cut, and it's not a guy that anybody is going to like seeing cut.
Yeah,
a guy like Converse, Bernard Converse, or someone like that.
It's really not easy. I'm very curious to see what Joe Douglas does. We'll find out next Tuesday. They got to cut down the roster, so we're going to get a lot coming out after this game on Saturday. From Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, a lot of action of guys getting cut. And then who knows, maybe someone gets cut from another roster and then the Jets want to poach that guy. That complicates things too, trying to figure out the 53s, because we have no idea who's going to get cut from some of these other teams.
Absolutely. Like if we were to grab an inside offensive lineman, I think something we all want, does that mean it's a different position, or does that mean like 𝐒𝐿𝐬 Newman gets cut? Like, are we looking to upgrade from him? I think they like Wes as much as we don't. So I don't think he's going to be cut. But I could be wrong about that too. It's just a matter of who gets, who shakes free.
Yeah, it's, again, we kind of got to wait and see at this point, but it's going to be incredibly difficult to project what the roster looks like. Dano is back, says, did you guys see the play from yesterday, the play-by-play from yesterday? I found it most interesting. We had Conklin at fullback on a rep. He motioned out, but still, I think all our tight ends will have ability to sprinkle in at fullback. Yeah, I'm not really too surprised to see him line up in the backfield. I think that's something the Jets would want to do more with their tight ends. That feels like more of a Jeremy Ruckert thing than Tyler Conklin, but he, I think, can handle it as well too.
I think the one thing about this team that we've seen that they've delivered on, where it hasn't been just talk, is versatility in the rooms. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think you're seeing them really push guys and try to get the most out of players. And I think it's showing in every room, right? We're seeing it in the running back room. We talked about it before. We've seen offensive linemen. We see Olu being used at right tackle. You've seen Mitchell being used at guard last year. You see Brady Latham, who I was talking about, being used at center. There's a lot of we see Carter II being used sometimes as a safety, right? Doing the role of a safety. So there's a lot about versatility on this team. They constantly, and go for players like that, like Chuck Clark. So it just doesn't surprise me anytime you see something like that. Again, regular season, I agree. I think Jeremy Ruckert would be more of the prototypical when we want to line up a fullback in the backfield. We don't have a fullback. It's going to be Jeremy Ruckert. But why wouldn't you want Conklin to have some reps and have the ability to line up that way as well when you're a team that values that so highly?
J-Boy wants to know, can Rodgers roll out of the pocket with someone coming for him full speed? Well, good news. We got a clip of that from yesterday at practice that we could pull up. A really nice pitch and catch where Rodgers gets some inside pressure and then ends up rolling out and hitting Garrett Wilson, who was wide open down the field. So I would say yes. I know someone wasn't necessarily coming at him full speed, but he's mobile enough to get out of the pocket, move around, find someone down the field, and connect.
Yeah, he's not the statue Joe Flacco is. Like when we call him a statue. He's not what he used to be, but it's not like all of a sudden he can't move and doesn't have movement. But also more important than his speed and his ability to move is just his awareness. It's about moving soon enough. It's about knowing when to bail and start to roll soon enough. And I think that's where Aaron Rodgers, where there's a big difference between him and other quarterbacks that are getting older or just not as mobile, is just the ability to get out of trouble sooner, to sense when the pocket is breaking down. And hopefully we'll see very little of that, because one thing I saw in yesterday's practice that I loved, and everybody should be watching Ryan's, video of every play from yesterday. And I think one thing that is really fun to do, you might want to pay attention to this, is how long or how short of a time that Aaron Rodgers is holding the ball. Because one of the things that got me excited about yesterday's practice was that ball was out of there almost every play very, very quickly. And that makes it a lot easier for everyone.
Yeah. It's crazy to me in a way, because it's so against what he normally does. The play that he got hurt on last year, he got hurt because he held on to the ball too long. He probably should have hit Garrett right there, and who knows what would have happened after that. But you're so right that like any training camp practice that I've gone to, he's not afraid to just, if it's not there, boom, quick to the check down or right to Tyler Conklin over the middle of the field. He's been a really good safety blanket for Rodgers over the time. So that's a really good call out of how quickly he's getting the ball out. I think that's an important note. Brandon has a question. I'm going to let you answer this one, Jeremy. Is Zach Kuntz resting with the starters in this game, do you think?
No. The only way they're resting a lot. The only way they're resting Kuntz is if they release him before the game. If they say, you know what, it's not even worth it. But no, I think they'll be happy to use him as a body out there to, and I would be shocked if he even made the practice squad. I really would. Unless he's doing something outside of what we're seeing that they're still excited or hopeful about. But he just does not look like a good football player to me.
Now, I know you're a big fan of this next person we're going to pull up in the chat. So let's all enjoy together an Allison Tuckwab chat. You ready? So I'm going to read it to you. Try to decode it with me. I am a flower. Do we like Aaron or not? Or either tune from the next time we're bullying him. So I don't know if I'm coming or going. And why did we take nails and tooth pulling for him? Check, check. Jets, just check. What do we think?
I think what we're saying is that I think initially I think I haven't heard it this offseason. I have not. But when we first got Aaron Rodgers to the time he got hurt, and even after that, there was a lot of people still, and most of those people have faded away, but grumbling about how it was a mistake to get him. And it was so bad to get him, and talking about him that he's finished, that he's done, that it was a really bad move, that we wasted, that we're locked in salary cap and the future is going to be hurt because of him. So I'm guessing that's what we're talking about. And I didn't know that was an issue anymore, because I really probably haven't seen a single tweet or anything in the chat about anyone left over still complaining about the fact that we have Aaron Rodgers on this roster. I think that the average Jet fan and the major majority of Jet fans love that we have Aaron Rodgers right now, are very excited that we have Aaron Rodgers, and the last thing any of us would want is to not have Aaron Rodgers. So my answer to that is I don't know why it was difficult for people to realize how special it was when we got him, but I feel like we're all, as a fan base, on the same page now.
I like that decoding, because I had no idea what we were working with there. But you did. I
could be completely wrong, but I was an administrator in an elementary school for a long time. So,
so you have practice decoding things. I think that.
And Allison, I'm sorry, we know that it's the typing is not your thing, and it's and it's rough and everything, but we love you and we love your support of our channels.
Yes, very, very much so. Allison's an OG in here. We appreciate her. Dano says, I'd honestly cut some guys today, so players 50 to 75 could get some more reps. What do you think about that? Getting the roster down maybe 15 spots or so before going into this game. Doesn't look like that's going to end up happening here, but what do you think of the idea?
I don't think it's, I mean, I don't have anything against that idea. If I mean, rather than have them sit on the sideline for no reason, but if I don't think that anybody has a gun to their head to play these guys.
Yeah.
I just think that the second half, I think some guys might get playtime the second half just out of thank you for being here. You know, you came to our camp, you worked hard, and we're going to give you some tape and give you an opportunity to make it onto another team. I think that we do. I think that is part of it. I think that there is a return loyalty to some of the work that a lot of these guys come in and put in, and that they want to give them an opportunity.
Yes, I'm with you on that one. Anything else on resting starters? We went a little over a half hour on that. We could go into a little bit more, some questions and some joint practice thoughts if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, the one thing I want to say is I don't think anybody should be passionately fighting about this. Like, I know there are guys, we have some friends, I know 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and 𝐒𝐿, good friends of ours, that feel that we should be playing the starters for at least a couple of drives. But I don't think that it's something we should passionately fight over. Like, I don't think it's important enough one way or the other. Like, this shouldn't be a major thing that we fight over and we scream over and worry about. It's a small thing. Like, you know, it might be better to do it. It might not be better to do it, but it's not enough for us to get upset or fight or be divided over as a fan base. It's just, at the end of the day, this is what our coaching staff decided to do. And if you don't agree with it, you shrug your shoulders, but it's not the end of the world. It's a couple of drives.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's fine if you're like, hey, I think they should either play the guys or don't play the guys, but I'm honestly not losing too much sleep over their decision not to play it. Like, we're probably going to get it, which stinks. So, like, my last thing on this, which this really sucks, but if the Jets do lose against San Francisco in week 1, you just know there's going to be the comments of, see, this is why you play the starters in the preseason. And like, that is what I don't want to see or have to deal with.
Yeah, I hope people can understand that we are going to their stadium on Monday night, a team that not only was in the Super Bowl, I mean, they were a play away from winning that game, right? I mean, they were right there. Their offensive lineman got hurt, and it led to a sack directly related to the injury to their right guard or their right tackle. I mean, it was evident. This is a team that went literally to overtime in the Super Bowl. This is a Super Bowl caliber team that has been together, and the core of their team has been together for multiple years, same system. This is a team that is playing on their home field, is going to be fired up on a Monday night. It's an incredibly difficult game. It's a defense that's been in the top 5 for the last 5 or 6 years that we're going up against. We cannot overanalyze this game. I think obviously we would love to win, but if we are super competitive and we are in this game in the fourth quarter, win or lose, we should not freak out and not go nuts. If we get blown out, that's a different thing. If we look horrible all game, fine. I don't care who you're playing. You should. That's never an excuse. If you're saying you're a championship caliber team, you should never look horrible for 4 quarters against anybody on the road or at home. But if we take this Super Bowl team into the final quarter, and it's a bang bang, who has the ball last or whatever, comes down to the last couple of drives kind of game. If we lose that game that way, we should understand that that is nothing to hang your head about or say the season's over or complain that we didn't play guys in the and start second guessing. We could very easily lose that first game and still end this season 13-4.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's their toughest test right out of the gate. like the hardest game they'll play all year in the regular season is week 1. If they lose 30-6, okay, we could have that conversation if they lose 30-6 and look horrible. But if, as you said, if it's a 20-17 last second field goal wins it, I don't want to hear about them playing 14 snaps in the last preseason game, making that much of a difference. Let's go to joint practice because there was a lot yesterday to like, and we touched on it a little bit already, but my biggest takeaway, Jeremy, from joint practice, I don't know, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but Garrett Wilson is fucking awesome, is my takeaway from joint practice.
Somebody, Dano actually pointed out something I said by accident. I talked about the reverse jump or the fall of Allen Lazard, right? And how he looked his last year in Green Bay and what happened without Rodgers and playing on the Jets the next year and the difference that was. Now, can you imagine shifting that difference to Garrett Wilson and say Garrett Wilson has the same jump from those bad quarterbacks to Aaron Rodgers, and he was already 1,000-yard plus receiver? What that could mean. I'm not saying he will. I know it's a stretch. It's not many wide receivers do it, so it's ridiculous to guarantee it. But if he goes over 1,500 yards, over 10 touchdowns, I am not at all surprised.
So Connor Rodgers, who we all know and have a great deal of respect for, covers the Jets on Badlands and also does the pre and post game show. And he's on NBC, and on his NBC show with Matthew Berry, they do a lot of fantasy. And he compared Garrett Wilson to potentially having a season like 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐂 Lamb had a year ago. And he wouldn't say that lightly, obviously. Yes, he's a Jets fan, but when does he or any Jet fan who does this regularly come out and say that a player is going to have a season of all seasons? Which, as a reminder for what 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐂 Lamb did last year, he had 1,700 yards and 12 touchdowns. Could you imagine if a Jets wide receiver put up that kind of product? Like, my brain can't even wrap around the thought of a Jet putting up that kind of numbers offensively. That would be unbelievable, Jeremy.
I think the only thing that would prevent it is situation, not his lack of ability. I think in the right situation, he has every ability to do that. I think what would prevent that, and what my biggest doubt to those kind of numbers, would be Breece Hall, because Dallas Cowboys did not have a running back like Breece Hall last year. So that would be the only thing that would make me say, that's even the 1,500 yards. I think the biggest enemy to Garrett Wilson having big numbers is not a bad enemy. It's not a negative thing. It's just how good Breece Hall is and how good this offensive line is and what kind of offense we might be. Because we might dominate the line of scrimmage and just run up and down the field on people and just eat up the clock, have the ball for 40 minutes, which keeps our defense stellar. And that's the safest and easiest, most predictable way to win games. Less chance of turnovers. It's the safest, best way to assure and dominate and physically beat other teams. If you could just physically run over them and then just beat them, and stop them defensively. So I think that's what would be the number one factor that could prevent Garrett Wilson from like those, crazy kind of numbers.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I would love to see Garrett go over 1,500. He has the talent to do it, but you bring up a great point in the circumstances. The Jets, I think their identity, and I probably sound like a broken record. I've said it a million times on this show and others, but I think their identity is going to be elite defense, great running game, and a really good quarterback wide receiver connection with Rodgers to Wilson. Wilson will get his, and he'll go over. I think he had 1,100 yards was his best year. I think he'll go over that, maybe in that 12 to 1,300 range and close to 10 touchdowns. But I mean, with Breece, like, for me, I think Breece is going to be around 2,000 all-purpose yards, which that's also just an insane number to think about a Jets player putting up that many yardage. But like, I don't know. Would it shock you if he went for 1,400 yards on the ground and another 600 through the air? I think that's absolutely something that's on the table.
I would actually take the over on 2,000 for Breece Hall total yards from line of scrimmage. I would, if I had a bet, I would bet the over. So I don't think it's a long shot. I think it's more likely, in my opinion, if he stays healthy with that offensive line. I think just like Garrett Wilson, we haven't even scraped the surface of Breece Hall. I think we've seen flashes of who he is, and a lot of that has been buried by horrendously bad offensive line, bad quarterback play, 8-9 guys in the box. I think that has equally has hid who Breece Hall is. I think Breece Hall might very well be Adrian Peterson in his prime type of running back.
It's going to be really impressive. Brandon says, our running backs remind me of the Bash Bros in Mighty Ducks. Ever seen Mighty Ducks, Jeremy? Are you a little too old for that?
Of course.
Okay.
No, Emilio Estevez, the guy who's on Saturday Night Live now, the goalie.
Yeah.
Keenan.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Love those movies.
Those are fantastic. Great 90s kid movies. I love those. So love the reference, Brandon. And can't forget Braelon Allen, who we talked up. I think he's going to steal some touchdowns on the goal line from Breece this year. We might get a little frustrated if you're a Breece Hall fantasy owner, because inside the 5 would not shock me to see Braelon Allen come in and just pound the rock through.
Not at all. Not at all. Save the beating and the bruising, because they don't care. Like, the coaches don't care. They're doing what's best for the team. So if we get inside the 3-yard line, you might see Allen come in without question. Doubted on third down, though. Third down, when you have the option to run, you're gonna see Breece Hall in there.
Brian Bogan sends in a super chat. Thank you so much, Brian, for your support. Much appreciated. He says, my concern is we don't have a clever enough offensive coach to come up with the plays to take advantage of all these weapons on the field at the same time. That's a fair concern. Jeremy, what would your rebuttal be to Brian to maybe calm his nerves a little bit here?
My rebuttal is, I'm not a fan of this offensive coordinator. I do not think he's one of the smarter, better ones in the league. But I also say he's not as bad as everybody's saying he is. We had no offensive line last year and no quarterback. It's a very difficult situation. It's not like he's never had any success as an offensive coordinator. He was on the Jaguars when they made the playoffs, and look whose quarterback was then. I'm forgetting his name, but it wasn't anybody special. What I'm saying is, I'm not defending him and saying he's a great offensive coordinator. I'm just saying he's not as horrendous and incompetent as last year would show he was. Because understand, you have the 32nd rated quarterback play and no offensive line. There's not much he could have done. The other thing I want to say is, look at his track record with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback just 2 years ago and 3 years ago. Before he went to Denver as a head coach, 2 seasons, I think 1 MVP season for Aaron Rodgers, 2 of his best years in 21 and 22. I think you have to or 20 and 21, you have to, that's what appeases me. Like the fact that we have him with Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers left, I would think, man, maybe we need to get rid of this offensive coordinator. But with Aaron Rodgers, it's just not a concern to me.
That's what I was going to say. Aaron Rodgers, that he's going to essentially call the line, the plays at the line of scrimmage. So the plan last year was that Hackett was going to give the formation and maybe a play call, but Rodgers to go up to the line and have final say here. And that's what we saw on the one drive in the preseason where he taps his helmet, Garrett Wilson runs a fade route, and they hit it for a touchdown. If they have to go to Tyrod Taylor, or if, God forbid, any other quarterbacks in here, I'm going to be a lot more concerned about the play caller. But with Aaron Rodgers, not that I give Hackett the benefit of the doubt, I'm more giving Rodgers the benefit of the doubt that, like, he's going to elevate him just like Peyton Manning elevated Gase and just like Rodgers elevated Hackett in the past.
Yeah, even if we have to go with Taylor for a game or two, hopefully, knock on wood, that's all it would be. We are capable of beating a lot of teams with what we were talking about, elite defense and power run. We have it's a different offensive line now. So just having Taylor make plays when he needs to, some passing mixed in. There's a lot of games and a lot of teams we're capable of winning that game just by running the ball, just controlling the ball and great defense. Which doesn't take
sorry.
a genius. I'm sorry, I was just saying that doesn't take a genius offensive coordinator.
Absolutely. Sorry to cut you off there. To Jeremy's point, the receiver that could be comparable to Garrett Wilson is Aiyuk. Same circumstances with so much talent around the field. I'll take 1,300 yards. I think we all would. How would you feel about Garrett Wilson if he puts up 1,300 yards and let's say 8+ touchdowns this year?
I mean, if it's clearly because we run the ball a lot and we have a lot of other players and other weapons, and like the Niners, I couldn't care less. If we're scoring 25+ points a game, I couldn't care less. You know, it's like 1,300 yards could be because week 12 he gets hurt and he's out for the season, and that really sucks, right? 1,300 yards could be we do rely on him and he drops a lot of passes and hurts us and is good but not amazing. You know, but puts up a lot of yards because we use him some, right? 1,300 yards could look different. And I think this is a great point, and I think this is a great example. 1,300 yards is a tremendous amount of yards if you're a running team, if your team's identity is to run the ball and grind the ball, and you have all these other weapons putting up numbers and Breece Hall putting up 2,000. There's only so many yards to go around. So at the end of the day, let's just look at the results. Are we scoring points and winning games?
100%. Like, he's on the same team. He had just over 1,300 yards and 7 receiving touchdowns, which is a really good year, by the way. But you also have to take into account Christian McCaffrey had 2,021 total touchdowns rushing and receiving. So there's only so much to go around, right? Like, we made the joke, what was that last week, right? With Aaron Rodgers throwing for 6,000 yards with some of the number projections. Like, it's just not going to be possible for all these guys to get, crazy, insane production.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, as much as I would love to see Garrett get 1,700 yards and be like the CeeDee Lamb, in some ways that might be disappointing only in the sense of I really want to see Mike Williams be an 800-yard receiver, 800+ yard receiver that gives other team fits, because you double team Garrett and Mike Williams is going to eat you up. I really want to see 𝐒𝐿 𝐂 make huge plays, like screen passes that break into 40-yard plays. So I want Conklin to get 700-800 yards. So I love a lot of these players and I want to see them all do well. And there's only so many yards to go around. So as much as I would love to see Garrett at 1,700, that's going to come at a cost of me getting to see him, us getting to see some of our other Jet players that we really like get those inflated numbers.
Another movie quote or movie reference here. Brian says Clemens is like Serrano in Major League. Something's holding him back. Need to say, fuck you, Jobu. I'll do it myself.
That's a great analogy. That's great. I think that's an awesome analogy. There is a mental part. There's a mental thing going on in his head that he needs to let go of. Whether it's shit in his past, we don't know his life, but there's some kind of anger or something there that he needs to just get out of his head so he could just focus on playing football.
Maybe this is unfair, but to me, Clemens is one of the more frustrating guys on the roster because I think there's potential for him to be a good run defending edge player, but it just always feels like there's something else going on. Like after the blowout against Buffalo, and then there's the fight in the tunnel, and then he's like flipping off the people in Cleveland, and then the fight against the Panthers in the joint practice. Like, just feels like he's always involved in something extracurricular. Frustrates me.
Yeah, no, it's and mixed in is a lot of potential, a lot of good plays. There's talent there. There really is talent there. He showed it his rookie year and even had flashes during the next year, but he always seems to override that with the negative and cover up the positive. And if he can get rid of the negative, there's something there. It's the same thing with Lazard with the drops.
Yeah.
If you get, if you take the drops away from Lazard, he can be really a special player. And we saw that with Corey Davis too. It's like these negatives that hold these players back from being great players.
It's the truth. It's absolutely the truth. A couple more. We got time for a couple more in the chat. John chimes in, says, rest starters, don't risk a repeat of 2023. I guess John and Robert Saleh are on the same page there. They don't want to risk anything. Also, I see the chat talking about the turf debate. So Dano says, with Garrett's slide cancel highlight yesterday that JJ and Braelon retweeted, does that habit worry you for when transitioning to playing on turf more? It only takes one cleat to get caught on the carpet. Anytime a player goes down like that, it makes me a little bit nervous. These injuries could there's so an ACL or an Achilles is such a freak thing. Like, I don't love the MetLife turf. I wish they would change it, but like, I don't have any additional extra worry than I already had about an injury like that. How about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a part of me that's nervous for injury. And there's always a part of me that hates when players do certain things. Like, there's certain extra, like, I know it's extra effort. I know we want the extra yards, but there's also situation, right? Like, big division game, close game, down to the wire, do the extra effort, do that crazy reach or that crazy slide or whatever it is. And I understand. But up by 3 touchdowns against Denver, for example, don't do that. Just go down. Don't even be in the game. Play. We have a lot of other good players, but like, I'm always nervous about injury because to me, especially this year, when you look at this roster, because to me, it's the biggest threat to taking our opportunity to win a championship away. The biggest threat is injury. So I know a lot of people say, oh, stop, Jeremy. It's football. It's a man's game. Man up. Stop being so nervous about injuries. The reality is it's the number one factor that could end this dream, I think. I'm going to call it a dream of finally getting that championship. And I don't see any other thing that puts us competing for a championship at risk more than injury.
All right, here's a good question to close out with. Daniel's hanging with us, our resident Dolphins fan in the chat. When Rodgers throws it quickly, he gets praised for it. When Tua throws it quickly, he gets criticized. Just saying.
It's hard for me to respond to that because I don't criticize Tua. I think Tua is really good for who he is. Like, with the right coaching, the right system for him, he's not a cannon. He's not a Drew Bledsoe. He's not a Jeff George. He's not a guy that if you have a game plan that's a cannon, that's not the right thing. But he's super accurate. He's super good in the system he's playing in. He makes the Dolphins offense very good. He's done a great job for them. So it's very hard for me because I don't know who's not praising him. But I'd say anybody that's still saying Tua is terrible or putting him down or insulting him is just doing that out of bias and not real football analysis. Because Tua is a good quarterback.
Yeah, he's good. I wouldn't put him in an elite tier, which is fine. Where do you think Tua ranks quarterback wise? Somewhere between 10 and 15, maybe?
Yeah, which is great. Which is not an insult at all. I mean, there's a lot of teams out there. For many years, we needed that, right? I mean, being a middle of the quarterback, the 15th or 14th best quarterback in the NFL you're a $50 million player. Let's face it. If you could do that and you give your team a chance. You might not be the guy that's going to put them on your shoulders and bring them the championship, but he is certainly good enough that if they put the right guys around him and their defense plays well enough that they can compete for a Super Bowl. And how many people get to have a top 5 elite quarterback? You got to be happy with that. If you're a team that has a guy like Tua, it might not be the same as having Patrick Mahomes, but at least you have a guy that puts you in the conversation.
Yeah, Tua's going to get criticized like that until they win a little bit more at the end of the season. I think how each of the last 2 years ended is a big reason for that. They kind of limped into the playoffs, and one of the years he was hurt too, so not going to crush him for that. But last year really struggled against teams over 500 and in cold weather, and in the playoffs kind of the same thing happens. So if he goes out and wins a playoff game this year or a playoff game or two and they win the division, then I think the narrative will change, but it's still kind of a wait and see.
And there's a lot of quarterbacks in that circle. that just like Tua need to win those big games before they're going to get all of the accolades and the respect of those top tier quarterbacks. I mean, I think the same thing with Herbert and San Diego. I mean, there are guys out there, they're very good and they put up some good numbers, but you need to win the big games. You need to lead your team and to show that you can win the big games. Otherwise, you're never going to be considered in that upper echelon.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. So I'm with you. I think that's a good place to close the show. We're just over an hour here. Love being back here on Thursdays with Jeremy. We'll be back again next Thursday. And good news, regular season football will be right around the corner at that point. The roster will be pretty much set at that point. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited. Any final thoughts here as we close?
Just another great week. Always great to stream with you, Matt. Thank you, everybody who's watching, everybody who watches later on video in the playback, guys in the chat, super chats. We appreciate you all. Really appreciate it. That's why we do it. That's why we love it.
That's going to do it for us. I'm Matt. He's Jeremy, and we will catch you next time.